Hello and welcome to the next stage of the Business Studies Challenge, which is all around market research. This is an area that I'm personally really passionate about because I love data in what we can do in business, but pulling it apart and making sense of trends and why things are occurring is fundamental to me. It starts to pull apart, okay, this is the reason why we're doing this. This is the logic behind it. This is the numbers behind it. This is why these things are happening, to make sense of those decisions. Now, as you're looking to propose a brand new idea, market research is all about validating your thinking, why it's going to occur, why this is going to be a successful idea. So it's a really exciting stage to go through, and the benefit of doing this in class before you come into the workshop is you can pull together some really great data and then come in and hit the ground running with your rapid prototyping, knowing you've got really good quality information behind you to take that forward. So let's get straight into it. So in terms of market research, you're doing it for a reason. There is something that you need to know. And there's a couple of things that you can work through. So you can look at the market size. How many customers do you think are in the market that you need to target? Potentially, what's the percentage that you actually need to attract? Are you going to get enough to make your idea viable? Are there trends in the market? Is the industry changing? Is the population base changing that will either value add to your idea or actually detract from your idea? You might need to do a competitor analysis to see who is out there, whether you've got competitors that might steal your market share, or potentially there aren't that many competitors out there. You need to analyze that and do some research. Maybe you've got to actually go deep in your customer profile. What does your customer actually like doing? How much do you actually know about your customer? Or you might want to make some decisions based around your customers' decision-making processes and their lifestyles. Now, they're all different options, but you are probably going to need to do most of them. You're going to need to find out how many customers are in your market to go, wait a minute, is there actually enough customers that we can target? Doing a trend analysis on the industry, your population, and also your competitors is really key to know who else is out there and what they're doing. And then defining that customer profile and really understanding what your customers think and do. That's absolutely fundamental. I do a lot of stuff in social enterprises, and even pulling apart customer profiles, for example, they think about the people they're going to help and they make very, very broad assumptions. A really fantastic one is homelessness, that says that most of us believe homelessness is because people don't have jobs. But it's actually because of housing insecurity. About 98% of homelessness in New South Wales is based on housing insecurity, not because they don't have jobs or because they have drug addictions. So you've really got to understand who your customers are to be able to accurately target them. So I'm going to take you through some steps on what you can do and to do around your research, but really call out what you need to find out for your ideas. And there's two ways to do market research: primary sources or secondary sources. So your primary sources is actually you going out there and gathering the data yourself. It might be an electronic survey, you might be posting things out to people, it might be a face-to-face survey, you might stand on a street corner or talk to people or catch people as they're coming through, or you might sit on the phones and call some people. I don't expect you to do that. If you've got a business-to-business client base though, that might be how you get to them. So that's how you find the information yourself, pull it together, and then start to understand and unpack that, because you've got this really great data sample that is yours and it's unique and specific for what you need. Now, you can also do what we call secondary research, or otherwise called desktop research. You might start looking at some website. The Australian Bureau of Statistics is going to have some great information. There's going to be industry bodies, local government bodies, local business bodies. There's going to be lots of groups out there that has data online. But you've really got to make sure, is this the data that I need? Is it valid? Is it up to date? Is it correct? Some data sources are very, very good at putting a slant on the information that might not help your idea. But the data source actually might say your idea is fantastic. So you really want to pull apart the data and make sure that you know what you're getting. So primary sources and secondary sources, you're going to need to use a mix of both to really get your ideas going. So if you're going to go out and do primary research, you're probably going to do a survey, and you need to plan this and you need to prepare. And so in this, open up with a couple of introductory questions to start the conversation. If your first question is how much money you earn, it is not one that people are going to fill in. It just makes sense. So ask them what their name is, their age group, maybe their gender, maybe the location that they live. There might be some things that you need for your idea. If your idea is about families, you might ask them about how many kids they have. So really pull that apart. So you've got a couple of nice, easy questions. We're all used to putting down our date of birth and our name and different things. Now, don't ask for the date of birth. There's security reasons around and all sorts of stuff. Some people are very uncomfortable giving you the date of birth, but just a couple of introductory questions to start. You might ask them about their perception of the industry or what you're looking to step into. Do they think people need this or value it, or what do people think about this industry? And then you might want to look at your competitive advantage. Do they actually value your competitive advantage? It might be a simple yes, no. Do you think this is a good idea to do this? Yes, no. And if you've got some data that says, hey, 85% of the people we surveyed said yes, that's great. Awesome, well done. You might want to ask them about your pricing. How much would you pay for something like this? And how much would you pay if you've got this as well? You might pull apart some of that to give you some data analysis that says this is what your price should be. You might have some issues that in your team you're not quite sure about. You're umming and ahhing as you're filling your entrepreneurship canvas and going, we kind of couldn't work out which one we want to go with. So why don't we ask the question to our consumer group? Why do they want to do business with us? What's the issue that we think we need to do? Is this a really key thing that we should be really hung up on, or is it actually not a priority? If you are doing a paper survey, you will need to have a comment section as well to capture those last minute ideas that someone said. Have you got any feedback? Have you got any thoughts? Because there might be some real gold in that actually really helps you out with your ideas, and that anecdotal information can shift and redesign your idea. Now, in designing your personal survey, I would say, first of all, make sure it's no longer than a page. Anything longer than that, it's going to be quite hard to fill in. Sort of 15, 20, 25 questions. It takes a fair bit of time to get through. So try and make it a single page. Use multiple choice answers where possible. If you're going to ask me for my age, give some age brackets that are really, really easy to understand and start to work out where people fall into those groups. Ask them yes/no questions. If there's actually like what words or what sentiments do you feel about this, give them a range of options. Maybe put another option there so they can put their own words in. But the thing is that you actually want to categorize and classify this information afterwards. So make it easier for yourself by getting your customers to choose an option that's there. Consider how the questions are going to be perceived. Some of us can really write some blunt questions that nobody wants to answer. And I'm just going to call it out now because you really want to think of how do you open up someone's answers and really make them feel comfortable sharing it. I've often written surveys myself, and I've done quite a few for organizations where I've written the survey out as though someone could read it on a counter and feel comfortable to fill it in, as though there's some sort of personal monologue in their head that's like, oh, first, can I please have your name? And how old are you? And whereabouts, what's your postcode of where you live? Those are how I write my questions, so that then if I'm speaking it, I can step through it really clearly, but it gets a really personal tone. It's not just tell me where you live, tell me your age, because that's sometimes the way things come across. So look at how your questions are going to be perceived, that people want to be open and answer your questions. Make sure you're able to analyze your audience, and that's where those introductory questions come in. You might want to analyze how many children they have, and so you can start to go, wait a minute, families with more kids actually are statistically more likely to do this business, or less kids, or something like that, or potentially where they live, or their age group, or something like that. So make sure you try and identify how you might classify your audience and break it down a little bit, and then your data set can work with that. Even if it's just male and females, how do they respond differently to this so we can target the market appropriately? And then use multiple media sources. Don't just sit there and go, I'm going to send out a SurveyMonkey form and email it to everybody and think that is going to be enough. I can tell you it's not, and I'm probably sure some of your customers are not online. And so you need to look at different ways to get this out there. You're probably going to have to do, if it's a tourism idea, you might have to go stand on some street corners or go to some airports or some information centers and really talk to them and actually get some ideas. So think of different ways that you can gather information to make sure you've got a consistent and really rich data source that helps validate your idea. This is what this is all about, learning more and validating your idea. So that's just some really brief overviews of doing some market research and some tips on doing your own research. In terms of that secondary market research, it's really key, as I said, that you've got to check your data sources and make sure it's valid. Have a look at what information you need. Make sure it's really clear you know what you actually need to gather so that you actually get the information you need to go. Sometimes you can go down a rabbit hole and find all this great information that's actually not relevant to your idea. So make sure it's really clear that you know what you need to do. So I'm going to give you some next steps to go into this market research stage and really spend the time pulling together data. So first of all, as a group, identify what you actually want to learn. What do you need to find out to validate your idea? What things do you think are going to look really good in a business plan? What things do you think are really good that investors are going to want to hear? What things do you think it's fundamental so you understand how your idea is going to work? Then go and design the survey and get it out there. Get it out to people. Get people filling it in. And while that's occurring, get that desktop research completed so you know who your competitors are, what's happening in the industry, and some of those bigger trends that you need to identify. I encourage you to make sure you've brought a report to the final day. It might have competitor analysis and stepped it out. You might have then your audience analysis and customer profile and different things and broken all down. But I encourage you to take the time to really get some good data, synthesize it. What does this actually mean? And have that clearly laid out so that when you come into the workshop day on August 8th, it's really easy to understand. You don't have to sit there and refilter all the information through. Now, my last tip for doing market research is take notes. I have seen countless times in school programs that I teach, kids go and find a whole heap of information. And you might do this as well. You start going down and finding all this information and you get all this stuff and then someone goes, okay, where did you find that out? It's like, oh, I wasn't sure. I didn't take notes. I didn't write it down. I've also seen people who find all this information. It's in here, but it's not on paper. So they can't remember it and they kind of get confused and numbers start to jumble together. So if you are doing the research, have a sheet of paper there, have a screen there, whatever it takes to write it down, to note it down, every source, go so you know where everything comes from. Because as you know, you've got to reference things. And if you don't keep track of what you're finding, you won't know. And someone might ask you, that number seems weird. And you can go back and you go, wait a minute, that data source is really weird. I'm going to cut all that stuff out of it because that's actually not relevant. And you can only do that from knowing where you went. And so as you find out what you need to learn and do that desktop research and even that primary research, did we stand in some weird spots? Did we actually not analyze our audience? You'll be able to start to really understand, is this data worthwhile? Is it meaningful? And that will give you a really solid foundation so that you can start developing up your business idea in our workshop on August 8th. Good luck, teams. This research part is absolutely fundamental. Your idea may be fantastic, but if you've got no if you haven't got a customer, if you haven't got a competitor, it might be really, really hard to do. So good luck.